Some 6 million of Europe's Jews, there were 8 or 9 million at the time, they were murdered basically by the Nazi regime. They called that the Holocaust. It was a modern genocide. The Pope during that period was Pius XII. In the years following the war, he was praised by many Jewish leaders for all that he had done to save or to try to save European Jews. But in 1963, a play was published. It's usually translated as a deputy, but the better translation would be the vicar, because it refers to the Pope, by a Swiss communist. And it maintained that Pius had remained silent during the war, instead of speaking out against the Holocaust. It implied that Pius was an anti-Semite, that he was afraid of the Nazis, he was not courageous enough to take a stand against the genocide, because he feared losing all the Vatican investments. So since 1963, the debate has raged over the alleged silence of Pius XII. So there's many different issues revolving around the Holocaust, the silence of Pius XII, did he remain silent or didn't he, the reaction of the Catholic hierarchy in other countries in Europe and in Germany, the reaction of lay Catholics in Germany to the Holocaust, the question of how is it possible for Christian Europe to have acquiesced in the genocide of a people, and also the question to what extent did the treatment of Jews by the medieval church, did it lay the groundwork for the Holocaust? Now, of all of these different questions, and we can't look at them all, we're going to concentrate more on Pius XII, because that's the main focus of attack. There's an industry out there of books which churned out every year for and against Pius XII. That's something that doesn't seem to be ending, so it's very hard to keep up. So Germany had been defeated in 1918 in the First World War, and the Germans felt that they were not responsible for the First World War. They felt that they were not the aggressors, and they felt that the terms imposed on them by the Treaty of Versailles were completely unfair and humiliating. And Germany had to pay the West had to pay for the war, and the idea there was to keep them down, to prevent them from rising up again, because it had just the opposite effect. It caused a serious depression in Germany, so Germany was ripe for a nationalistic leader, and they got one. So they wanted revenge. So Hitler and the National Socialist Party, the Nazi Party, they came to power in Germany in 1933. They were elected to the government by a plurality of votes, not a majority, and they failed to get a majority in any single area of Germany where Catholics were the majority, but they were elected by democratically. Germany at that time had around 60 million people. Around 21 million were Catholics, or about a third of them were Catholics. So Hitler set out his program clearly before he even came to power. He wanted to consolidate Germany, to rearm Germany, to make treaties with Britain and Italy, and then make war on France, and then war with Russia to obtain living space for the German people. This was all set out in his writings, so people should have known what he was up to. He was very anti-Semitic. He had spent years in Vienna. He's Austrian. He grew up in Austria. And he had these notions of radical racism and nationalism. He said, he had this sort of twisted idea of what the Jews were. He said they're a race, they're not a religion. He had these racist notions of Jews of the 18th century that he picked up. So he had a plan for the Jews as well. Their civil rights were going to be removed, he said. They were going to have no right to hold public office, and he was going to force them to emigrate. In all of his writings, there's no sign that he's going to actually try to execute all of them or kill them. He wants them to get them out of Germany because he feels that they are not really true Germans. That these racist ideas of Aryanism, which I'm sure you've all heard of. So he saw the Jews as opposing everything he stood for. They were internationalists, and he was a radical nationalist. He believed that the best people should rule. He was influenced by Nietzsche and Superman, whereas the Jews promoted democracy. So instead of the best ruling, they thought that the democracy should be there. He believed in militarism, and he thought the Jews were pacifists. He saw them as responsible for the Russian Revolution, the League of Nations, financing World War I against the Germans. And so they were responsible for her defeat. So he really had it in for them. He said they had no culture of their own, they were just parasites who produced nothing of their own. So he basically hated the Jews and saw they stood for everything that he hated. So when he came to power, he followed his program. He made some legislation against the Jews called the Nuremberg Laws in 1935, which forbade them from marrying Aryans. They were not allowed to start up new businesses. He revoked their citizenship, and he tried to get them to emigrate. In 1938, there were more laws against them. He began to expropriate their businesses. He forced as many as he could to emigrate. He put others in concentration camps and forced labor camps. He gave them a special ID and ID cards. They were not allowed to be in parks or in public places. They were expelled from schools. So he tried to make life so difficult for them that they would have to leave Germany. So many German Jews did emigrate, but it was difficult because they had to find a country that would take them. The British wouldn't accept them, and nor would Britain let them into Palestine. And a lot of them wanted to go to Palestine, but the British it was a British colony at that time, or protectorate, and Britain wouldn't let them in. The US and Canada did not want to be saddled with thousands of Jewish refugees either, so they had trouble emigrating. They had to find places to go, and they had to find a country that would be willing to accept them. In November of 1938, the violence against the Jews begins in Germany, and so there's a sort of a program against them in Germany. Also then, in 1938, Hitler rearms Germany, and he bullies Austria and Czechoslovakia into giving in to him. Then he made a treaty with Russia in 1939, and on September the 1st, he attacked Poland with Russia. In the spring of 1940, he attacked and defeated France, and in June of 1942, he attacked Russia. As you guys all know, it's World War II history. Now, as we're going to see, the Pius XII and the Vatican, they made enormous efforts to try and save the Jews, and they did succeed in saving many hundreds of thousands of Jewish lives. So who was Pius XII? His name was Eugenio Pacelli. He was born in 1876, ordained in 1899 at the age of 23. He seems to have been an extremely gifted person. He spoke Latin, Greek, English, French, German, Spanish, Portuguese, Hebrew, and Aramaic. So, and Italian, of course, yes. Being his mother tongue.
Only way he needed it.
So his talent was quickly spotted by Pope Leo XIII. He entered the diplomatic service. During World War I, he was given special assignments by the Pope then, Benedict XV, to try to obtain a peace settlement. He became a bishop in 1917, and his first assignment was to Germany, actually to Bavaria. At that time, there was no concordat between the Vatican and all of Germany, but each of the different areas of Germany had their own concordat with the Vatican. So Bavaria, being in the south of Germany, had a concordat, and he went there as representative to Bavaria, the nuncio to Bavaria. He stayed in Bavaria from 1920 until 1925, and then he was made a representative to the Weimar Republic in Berlin, which was the name of the government at that time in Germany. He was then made secretary of Pius XI, the Pope, and he was elected Pope himself in 1939, just before the war started. Now, he knew Germany very well. He spoke German well. He spent, whatever it was, 10 years there. He liked the Germans a lot, and he knew Germany very well. Now, although it was the Nazis who would be the first to sweep across Europe in war, Pope Pius, Pacelli, and all the Catholics were looking apprehensively at the rise of communism in Russia. By 1939, Lenin and then Stalin, they had killed about 15 million Russians in concentration camps. They had killed over 5 million people in the Ukraine through a forced policy of starvation. They had killed around 8 million peasants in the war against the kulaks. The Catholic Church in the Ukraine and Lithuania had to go underground. Any Catholic priest that was caught was killed. You couldn't be a Catholic in communist Russia. So that was serious, and that looked a lot more dangerous than anything that Hitler was saying in power. They were killing anyone they could find. Hitler was also anti-clerical. He had plans to take over the church, the Catholic Church in Germany, after the war ended. But when the war began, he signed a concordat he had signed a concordat with Pius XI. In 1933, the year he came to power, Pius XI signed a concordat with Hitler's regime. It was the first time since, I think, the unification of Germany that a concordat had been signed between Germany and the Vatican. At that time, as I say, Hitler's plans to kill the Jews were unknown. He was clearly an anti-Semite, but what he had written about, what he talked about, was forcing the Jews to leave. So what were